Friends, today's NRI Samai program from Los Angeles brought to you commercial free by listeners like you. Your generous donations make possible for us to stay commercial free, and today's show is pre-recorded. If you have a question for the guest, please send an email to nrisamai@gmail.com. We will follow up with the guest and find the answer for you. Thank you for your support.
Good morning and good evening to all our listeners on NRSMA. Today we have a very interesting topic related to education. Education, as we all know, has in today's world especially has become very demanding. It's become very competitive, and it's also become very expensive. Not to mention the stress the kids and the parents go through. And the quality of education, on the other hand, has been going down. And so amid such a landscape, amid such a scenario, we have quite a few parents out there who are experimenting with something called as homeschooling. Now, we have one such parent with us today, and we are extremely fortunate to have Aravinda Pillalmari, who who wears many hats. She's a volunteer, she's an activist, she's an aide Association for India Development, Jeevan Sati. She works with the farmers, she works with the grassroots level activists. But today, she is going to be talking in her role as a mother to a 13-year-old daughter. Her name is Khiali, which, by the way, Aravinda, is a beautiful name. So Khiali actually learns about the society around her. She learns about the complex mathematical problems, the challenges posed by the physics, and she has no boundaries. She learns about anything and everything. So, Aravinda, I'd like to start out by asking you, was homeschooling a conscious decision that you and your husband made, or was this more of an accident that you stumbled upon and you thought of experimenting with that?
I think that oh gosh, it's so hard to answer a question like this, because after all these years, for us, living and learning are integrated and not at all separate things. And how can you not learn? You are always learning. So it's called homeschooling, but it's certainly not confined to the home. It's part of life. It's part of the world. It's part of everything you were talking about. Working, being an activist, working with farmers, just living and breathing and being open to the world and all it has to teach, all the people around you, animals, experiences, the way the wind blows. Everything is a learning experience. Everything is a teaching experience. And when you live that way, then you don't think of schooling as a separate activity that requires that requires a separate frame of mind to take part in.
Right. But this is so much different, like dramatically different to what's happening right outside your doorsteps, right? It's because, you have your neighbors, you have your family, you have basically the entire society sort of has been weaved into this concept of schooling, that you have to go through a formal education, an academic process, and only then you will be recognized as someone in the society. So this I understand what you're saying, this as a natural process, but was it such an easy decision that, as you just laid out, that you thought everything is a learning experience? Having made that decision, how difficult was it?
I'd like to first point out that, whether you are in school, out of school, preschool, post-school, everyone learns this way. Even people who might, people who are in school, if you just casually are talking about the experiences where they really had that aha moment that they really learned and got something, then this kind of free-form learning is something that's going on with everyone, whether they're in school or not in school. And in our neighborhood, other children talk about about things that really excite them, and it's hardly ever something that happened in school. It's often something happened in spite of school. So even if they are attending school, they're all very attuned to this holistic way of learning. And I think as far as our own decision, if you want to call it that, I think that I think every parent really observes the way their children make discoveries and make observations and can make connections from even before they can talk, in how they express themselves, how they respond to things. And when you see how powerful a learning drive that a child has, then I think everyone sees that powerful learning drive, and if they had the confidence that the same drive with which a child learns to walk and talk, without anyone guiding for them, teaching them, grading them on doing those things, that same drive would motivate them to learn almost everything else around them, then the world would be organized in a way that would facilitate that. And at a micro level, at a household level, you can give a child more time and space for these kinds of explorations if you value them, if you have confidence that the children can can explore and learn and discover and make mistakes and try things out. Take something like baby talk. When children are first learning to talk, and they might make up some words, they might use some words differently or use them differently from the conventional way that we've grown accustomed to using them. But people sort of like it. People are fascinated by it. At least when children are 2 or 3, there's not so much pressure to correct them, but there's more freedom to appreciate their innovative use of language or numbers, and let them actually get out there as if they were discovering language for the very first time, as if nobody had created it before. Yes, they're listening to the language used by the people around them, but they're also making it up. They're also trying out things. They're making up words. And in every family, there will be words that were made up by their own children. There will be a tiny subset of language which is spoken only within that family, because it was made up by people in that family, and it was validated and recognized as part of that family language. So that experience of being a pioneer, explorer, and inventor is permitted in those early years of life. And if we could just extend that a little bit more and not rush in to tell children, these are your colors, these are your numbers, this is the alphabet, this is what gravity is. Why do we tell children what gravity is? I mean, don't we trust that apple can fall down on their head too? I mean, obviously it doesn't need to be an apple, but I mean, are we any less than Newton sitting under the tree and connecting the falling apple to the rotating planets? Such discoveries are happening all the time. And occasionally we recognize them, but we don't always. So we should first of all we should accept that we are only going to perceive a tiny percent of all of the discoveries that children are constantly making. Even if we don't recognize them, we can still allow the time and space for them. Instead, if we crowd out the time and space with activities that we believe are important based on our frame of reference, based on our understanding of what learning is and what the world is, then what is the space for children to discover and explore what they believe the world is, how they think that their senses, how they make sense of the world through all of the senses. And we sometimes learn about other cultures that are so-called uneducated or illiterate cultures, where maybe there hasn't been so much of modern systematized knowledge, standardized knowledge imposed upon them. And we hear that they hear sounds from plants or there are colors in the air, and I won't be able to say them in a meaningful way, but that's because it's so different from my frame of reference. But there could be a frame of reference where all of these things mean something and open up their world to nature and to science and to wonder that we don't necessarily understand. That doesn't mean that it's not valuable, because in that culture people had a chance to explore and develop that. They were able to get somewhere with it. And whether or not you get somewhere with it, that process of exploration is valuable in itself. The process of being a principal investigator, of designing the experiment, of exploring the world, trying things out, having the freedom to fail, having the freedom to make mistakes, is something that in a modern, urban, educated, upwardly mobile culture, we allow only in the very initial years of life, if you're lucky. What if we could allow that for a longer time? What if we could allow more space for that in parallel with, children are not going to grow up completely ignorant of our standardized knowledge because they're surrounded by it. It is, I refer to the years before children learn how to read as the precious pre-literate years, because it's really such a small percentage of your whole life that you jump into the world with all of your senses. You dig into the ground, you taste the rain, you experience the world as a whole, not something you read about from somebody else. As soon as you learn how to read, you read what other people have written about the world. And I love to read. I would never say that you shouldn't learn how to read, but what's the rush? You have maybe 5, 6, maybe 10 years where you don't know how to read. I mean, hardly anyone is allowed to be illiterate till they're 10, but some people are. And in all of those years, you will be exploring originally. You will be the principal investigator. And then you just compare how dependent somebody who knows how to read, how dependent that person is on what's written compared to, their memory power suddenly shrinks as soon as they have to depend on reading. If you talk to somebody who doesn't know how to read and write, you'll find that they can remember more, and therefore the space for making connections within is so much more intricate as a result of that. I am, the last person to say that reading is not necessary. I think it's a valuable skill practically and as well as spiritually. I'm very deeply connected to reading, but you have the rest of your life to do that, and you have only a few years of your life to explore as if nobody had ever done it before. And it's okay if you learn the standardized knowledge a little bit later in life, but you had that chance to just scratch out the surface of things with your bare hands.
Right. Well, those are some very great observations, and I guess in terms of allowing the natural evolution of this learning process. So given this context, how relevant is measuring this learning process becomes? Is it even required, or how do you know that this learning process is actually happening? Or
how does who know that?
I mean, how does the child know, or how does, as a parent, how do you know that there is a need for us to know whether the learning process is happening, or do we need to intervene or do something, or even does it even matter in this natural process?
Yeah, I mean, I could give any number of answers to that, but let me ask you a question. When after children learn how to talk, what is one of the words that they use the most?
What is the
Imagine a 3-year-old before you.
Yeah.
What is the word that you're likely to hear the most? What is the question you're likely to hear the most?
What is the word most likely? I think that would be calling their parents, Amma, Nana. Could be one thing. Most
okay,
often
once they've
spoken.
called their parents, what is the question they're most likely to ask?
That is, I think, why some of these things work the way they do work. I get a lot of why.
What was the first word? Yeah, exactly. As long as children are asking why, and as long as nobody is saying, don't ask why, or, you don't need to know that, or, children are always asking why. Now, many times they hear, the people responding to them either don't answer the question or they tell them not to ask the question, and the reason for that is often because they don't know the answer, or maybe there isn't even an answer. So it's more like they didn't understand the question, or because they didn't know the answer, they somehow devalued the question. But as the parent or the person being asked the question, one thing you should realize is just because you don't know the answer, it doesn't mean that the question was not worth asking. And I would go one step further. Even if there isn't an answer, it doesn't mean that the question was not worth asking. So there's a lot of learning process too. And this will, by the way, this will be true of more than half of the questions, I think. At least it feels that way because the easy ones get done quickly. So it's these questions like, okay, then we have to turn right. Why do we have to turn right? Well, because we're going that way. Why are we going that way? Because the park is over there. Why is the park over there? Sure. How long are you going to go? But actually, if you have some patience and you have an open mind and a spirit of inquiry, these things become really fascinating questions. And as long as the child is willing to ask why, as long as they have the patience to pursue it, why should we run out of patience? Right. And as long as that's happening, then you know that the learning is happening.
True. And you also said in this process, time and space are really critical, that they should be given the time and the space to grow naturally. So how much of that is dependent on the parents themselves? How much is the parents' involvement in this whole process? Like in this day and age where, I guess kids are seeing their parents maybe once in the morning, once in the evening, if they get lucky, or spend time mostly over the weekends. So given that, do you think this kind of homeschooling will be challenging in that kind of a setting?
So I'd like to step back a bit. I think that, homeschooling is a shorthand, and it's one manifestation of how one can support this kind of integrated learning. But I think that the community is the basis of learning. I think that we should be looking more at being connected in our neighborhoods, not simply in our homes. And I think that the way that not only children but even parents and even everyone can have more time and space is by having more connections with our neighbors. If children think of, even today, there are neighborhoods where children can go out to some extent by themselves. That extent is shrinking as communities become more modern. If you compare an Indian village to an Indian city, you'll see differences as to how far and how long, how far away from home a child can go, and how long they would be comfortable, or parents would be comfortable with them out of the house on their own. Of course, they're never on their own because the village community is there, or the urban community is connected enough to create a sense of a comfort zone, if you will. And when we have that, not only children have more space to roam, parents have more time as well as space. So it's a learning. It's more about creating a society where we can learn from one another, not to put the focus on children as the primary learners and parents as the one that either have to teach or have to supervise them as they learn. And rather, we want the community or even the immediate neighborhood to be a space where people can learn from one another and from their just everyday experiences. Whether that, even on the evenings and weekends, do we have that kind of safe space? We can start from there.
True. Now, let's say the child is in this natural learning process, the integrated learning process, and the child shows signs of liking a certain aspect of this learning. It could be connected with the plants, it could be connected with solving or maybe intrigued by space, or maybe solving the problems in and around the society. How do you then take that interest forward? Would you then feel the need for the child to be integrated into a formal learning system so that the child can pursue it further? I'm a little lost there.
Well, I think, however the interest has developed, you would be able to kind of go from there. I mean, if suppose they were outside and they get interested in plants because you had a garden, or the neighbor had a garden, or the sabjiwala came and they got curious about this, and maybe nobody has a garden, but you can go to a nearby place wherever these things are being cultivated, and depending on their interest, these interests will flower in different ways. And yes, it sometimes may happen that a child has such a sustained interest that you take them, either you take them to wherever this interest is being practiced, whether it's gardening or wood carving or I knew a child who was so much interested in animals that she went to in that village there was a kind of veterinary hospital, and she would go there several days a week and just help out with the different tasks, and eventually she kind of became an intern there. I'm not sure what she's doing now, but it did develop into a sustained interest that way. Sometimes, the interest, that's something where it's easy for us to see that this early childhood interest in animals then developed into something that has the potential of becoming a career choice. In other cases, it may not always be like that. They may be really, really interested in animals, but it may not lead to them becoming a veterinarian, but they may have learned other skills that they integrate into something else.
Mm-hmm. And what is Kiali's, I don't say, response because this has happened naturally to her. So, but did she ever express the need to go to the school along because her friends are going to the school, or did she ever feel or did she express that?
Yeah, so in our neighborhood in Bombay, actually, there are about 40 houses and between, let's say, 15 to 20 kids, and they actually they all go to different schools. Not more than 2 or 3 of them would be in the same school. So and they all get home around 1:30, 2:30, and every afternoon they all play together. And so that's the time that they all see each other. And so just like the rest of the kids, she also goes out. They play, almost every day, in vacation twice a day. And so actually, yeah, I mean, the school issue, it does come up, and I think she and I and my husband, all of us think that maybe it would be good to try out school sometime, but that sometime has never hasn't really come up yet. So
okay.
it remains a curiosity, just like maybe going and climbing a mountain sometime. I'm sure we'll do it sometime.
Wonderful. And and how has your friends reacted to this? In that same community, 40 houses, or even your friends, what was their reaction, or how do they, now that it's been such a long time, maybe they just think this is natural, or what was their?
Well, yeah, by now they're used to it, but I can remember. See, it's interesting because Kiali actually was very talkative at a very young age, and so a lot of people actually, even when she was 2, they would say, "Oh, what school is she going to?" And to me, especially, I guess it's not that unusual in India for children to go to school when they're 2, but I found that very, very surprising because at that time I had no idea what she would be doing school-wise. I wasn't even thinking about it because she was only 2. But meanwhile, these other people were asking about this. So then this answer of she is not going to school is something that came up. Whereas left to myself, it would never have occurred to me to think about school when she was only 2 years old. But because people kept asking me, that's when she's not going to school, she's not going to school. And, why? And, well, she's only 2. But then she became 3 and 4. And as this went on, I just felt, like I said, the powerful learning drive that the children already have. I didn't see how going to school, at least at that age, would enhance it. And from seeing what was going on around me, it seemed like it was probably constraining it. And in fact, other parents concurred on this point, that it was constraining, but they felt that there was no choice. In fact, even the preparation for the admission interview, they all actively complained about this every time when we met at the playground. They didn't have a single good word to say about it, but they didn't think that there was an alternative. And I didn't think that this was, it didn't look like, I was not at all interested in going this route, so there had to be an alternative. So the alternative was not doing it. So that's what we did. And there were a couple of years when my neighbors really did try to persuade me, because I guess they realized that all I ever heard was them complaining about the school. But some of them would take me aside and say, no, actually, they do learn a lot. It's a nice thing, and they did give me a little bit of this. That I would ask questions. For example. If there was a worksheet, and in fact I did show Kiali one of the worksheets that was in the very first math book. They had a bird and a house, and they had 2 birds and a house actually, and you had to circle the bird that was closer to home. And she circled a bird, which I could tell by looking that wasn't the bird that whoever wrote the textbook had in mind. And so I asked her why she chose that bird, and she had actually a perfectly reasonable explanation for it. And so I ran this by some of the other parents, and I said, well, what would happen if she did this? And they said, well, it would be marked wrong. So, well, clearly I wasn't going to have that. If they're not willing to hear her explanation of why this bird is closer to home, then then she doesn't need to go there. So I was pretty adamant about that at the time. Now it seems funny, but honestly speaking, if at that age when they are ready to explain why they think something, to sacrifice that for the sake of getting the right answer, that was too much of a sacrifice. I was not willing to make it. And so she not only she doesn't feel the need to answer the question, She will question the answer. She will also question the question if she thinks it's not a very meaningful question or an important question, or she has a better question in mind. And
right.
That was the kind of confidence which I felt was really the heart of the learning process. And so that is what gave me the confidence to continue.
I guess that's actually a very important point you mentioned, because in the school you are told what to do. You are always under instructions, and that limits our ability to think or express or question. Question the question or question the answer too. So that is probably only possible in this kind of a natural exploration process.
So the interesting thing is that if you look at the NCERT textbooks, if you read the introductions, they actually want teachers to create space for children to come up with different ideas, different answers. They actually have tried to write at least the social science books, okay? I think they could do this I think you could do this with math, science, with in every subject you could have, you could give children the opportunity to express their ideas, but at least in a subject like history or social science where the points are so critical or so key to understanding the information, the textbook editors have actually written notes to the teachers in the introduction to these textbooks saying that they should have time for children to just say what they think and draw from their own experience, and that no two answers should look alike. But unfortunately, from talking to the children and parents in my neighborhood, that's not how it works, because just the pressure of time and the need to complete the syllabus takes over. And some of the children in my neighborhood have told me that for each chapter they are given something called the question answers, which is answers to certain questions that they predict will be asked on the exam, and this is something that they're supposed to do with every chapter. So it's really sad that even in spite of the best of intentions and some forward-thinking, progressively minded curriculum developers, they are not able to implement this. And this is in a school in Bombay that has adequate resources and doesn't have a very high ratio compared to some other schools. And I have well-meaning teachers, to be honest. I mean, the teachers are also very creative and caring.
But I guess they are under pressure to show the results, right? And I guess in that pressure, they don't have a choice but to, stick to their basics, which is, show them the examination results, show them the passing percentage, and that's all what it takes.
Yeah, and I mean, it's also a certain confidence. I mean, you have to really, I take it for granted that I'm not expecting a certain answer, but when you are, if that's what you're used to, when you are expecting a certain answer and you don't get it, then the immediate tendency is to feel that something went off track, right? If that person had given the expected answer, you would still be on track and you would go to the next question. Now, because you didn't get that expected answer, it's as if you're going somewhere. The train has gotten stopped at a halt, and now you're just waiting for the train to continue because your mind is on the destination and not the journey. And this is a train that is on a track. Now, think if it's just like a bicycle that has gone off the path, and it takes a lot of it takes a lot of trust and a lot of open-mindedness to welcome going off the path, to see that whether you're on the path or you're not on the path is less important than where you're going and what led you there, how you're following the different tangents that come up, and having the confidence that all the paths converge at infinity.
All right. Now I'll ask you the $1 million question now. I was saving it for the last. So you went through a formal schooling and formal education, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So having seen that, and now you are watching Kiali, go through this natural process of discovery. If you were to recommend, what is best way to introduce learning to the child, especially in this competitiveness? Everybody is running after something, and there's like this big mad rush for everything. What would your recommendation be? What would your advice be to the parents? And I'm one of them, so I'm keenly waiting to listen to your answer.
I don't think we introduce learning to children. I think if we are receptive, children will introduce learning to us. And to be receptive, we have to slow down. We have to get out of that mad rush. We have to appreciate the depth that comes from not learning something as well as from learning. We have to see, we really, really have to embrace not learning as much as we embrace learning. And if we can do that, I wanted to kind of close with something that may sound a little bit paradoxical, but if we develop the kind of skills that are not part of this mad rush, actually those skills eventually become more valuable. Because they're rare and because everybody's looking for a way out of the mad rush.
Well, Aravinda, thank you very much for your valuable time and the wonderful words of learning and discovery. In case if any of our listeners would like to reach out to you for any clarifications, any questions, what would be the best way to get in touch with you?
Well, I have a blog. I'm going to mention two blogs. Okay, one is jivanshala.wordpress.com. Jivanshala is spelled Jivanshala. Jivanshala.wordpress.com, where I have posted some articles, reflections on education. And then I have another blog where I post more regularly on just overall aspects of peace, justice, and sustainability on the home front, which comes to learn as well as many other things. And that's Ask Amma. So that's just askamma.wordpress.com. And they can reach out through either of those.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you once again, Aravinda. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All the best.
Friends, if you liked today's show, please go to youtube.com/NRI Samay and click on the subscribe button. You will get notified every time we publish a new show. And you can also like us on our social media sites like Facebook, Twitter, and Google+.